Good afternoon. Welcome here to the Kenneth C. Rowe Management Building, the home of the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University. I'm Mike Smith. I'm serving as Dean here. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this panel. Thank you for being here. I'll start with our land acknowledgement, which is that Dalhousie University operates in the unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Passamaquoddy peoples. These sovereign nations hold inherent rights as the original peoples of these lands, and we each carry collective obligations under the Peace and Friendship Treaties. Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights in Canada. We recognize that African Nova Scotians are distinct peoples whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Here we're going to get started with our panel very momentarily. Folks are still trickling in. I know 4 o'clock can be a little bit of a challenging time, so we'll extend them grace. And at this point, all they've missed is my remarks, so that's fine. I'll just say that here in the Faculty of Management and more broadly at Dalhousie University, we believe that long-term prosperity for this region relies on innovators and research and development and translating research strengths into market strengths and attracting outstanding talent to this region to fuel our hopes and dreams and ambitions, producing highly trained people, and also specifically in this faculty that people have business acumen to go with their drive and vision. And so whether they have that themselves or whether they have a talent pool that they can hire from for amazing co-op work terms or graduates, we want to make sure that we're serving that need. And so this panel, which Dawn's going to talk about in a few moments, but the goal in putting this panel together for us is to showcase some of the amazing stuff that's happening in this region and things that we are ready to be willing partners in helping to advance and promote this kind of entrepreneurial activity in sectors where we think we have real strength in this region. I'm going to invite Don Mills to join us. Many of you will know Don. He's a business leader. He's a community leader. He's contributed to dozens of organizations in the region through service on boards. He's started a business. He's helped launch many businesses. And very often his work is focused on building a strong community and building a strong economy. You may also know him from his podcast with David Campbell, Insights, which is about it's hard to summarize, really, but it's really identifying opportunities across Atlantic Canada where there's ways for us to grow. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And bringing in these notable influencers and business leaders and decision makers to talk about what they see in that perspective. And Don might be too modest to say it, but he does have a book coming out this very month, which you should get from a book retailer near you. I'm quite excited for it because I know he sees and values the role that post-secondary education plays in building a strong region. The book is called Toward Prosperity, and there's a subtitle that I can never remember, but it's about the transformation of Atlantic Canada. And I love it because it's a note of optimism in a place where we haven't always been able to sound that note. And so I'm excited to crack that book cover myself. But enough from me. Don, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. And to my friends, the Gilfoys, good to see you all. I was asked to give a little bit of an introduction to this session. And I'm so happy to see this session happen, honestly, because I think if Neville was in the room, he would be thrilled. This is exactly continuing his legacy. And my brother Jim, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, and I, we put together the Neville Gilfoy Fund for exactly this purpose, to continue the work that Neville had done over his career, because he was not just an entrepreneur, he was a supporter and promoter of entrepreneurs in this region. And, my brother and I knew Neville for, 35 years. And he was a character. Could I say that? You know, but we love spending time with him because every time we spent time with him, we came away feeling better about the world around us. Like he was just that kind of person that you just, you know, you were better because you were in his presence. And we shared some common beliefs. You know, one was this, is that we felt that Atlantic Canada was underperforming economically and that we weren't living up to our potential. We also shared the belief that, you know, we needed to have bigger thinking, bolder thinking in our region, and that we needed to look at the opportunity in a different manner. I mean, Neville was a big promoter of Atlantica, which is really the idea of Atlantic Canada in the north and northeastern United States as an economic region, to look at it as a market where we could all prosper if we work together. And it's a big idea, it's a bold idea. And you know, we both shared the idea that we had to get rid of the barriers between jurisdictions, you know. And if there's anything good that has come out of the U.S., you know, problems that we're facing is that those trade barriers are going to come away shortly. And Neville would be thrilled by that because he was talking about it before it was a thing. He understands, you know, how important it was to take away those barriers if we wanted to be prosperous. And in fact, in the book that David and I wrote, it's a theme. It's a theme in the book that, you know, there are barriers for us to be successful in this region. But as we found out in the podcast that we've been doing over the last 4 years, anybody listen to the podcast in the room? Oh, thank you very much. We've done 200 so far. And every time we do one, we become more optimistic about the future of this region because we start to talk to the people who have been successful and in a region that's hard to be successful, and there's lots and lots and lots of successful people. And the other thing that we found out in our podcast, which I think is really interesting, is we've talked to virtually all the incubators and accelerators across Atlantic Canada, and there's a common theme that's coming out of those conversations. And the theme is this, is that, you know, when I started my business, I was looking at Halifax as my market initially. The young people coming along today, and I think we're going to see some examples of that today, they don't look local. They're looking nationally or internationally. And that's the kind of big thinking that we need in that region because, you know, we need to start exporting goods and services to other places in the world for us to be prosperous. We need to become a lot more productive in the work that we do. And if we can do that, you know, we'd be able to take advantage of the amazing place that we live. So the stories I think you're going to see today absolutely support that premise, that bigger thinking from younger people, and a lot more entrepreneurial activity, by the way, in this region than I've seen in my lifetime, which is really encouraging because we're underrepresented in the private sector in this region. It's all very, very encouraging. So I'm excited about what's happening. I want to make one other note because I think it's important. One of the things we've also noted is because of our population growth and because of the influx of people from other countries, we're getting more entrepreneurial by the day because the people who are coming in from other countries tend to be a little bit more entrepreneurial than native-born Canadians. And we haven't had that in our mix ever in this place. So that's another element that's making a big difference, and I just wanted to make that note. So with that sort of introduction, I'm really pleased to see this going on and, you know, celebrating entrepreneurs. I think, you know, it's the other thing that Neville and I shared is that we never celebrated the success in this region well enough. I mean, the whole idea of face-to-face and the top 101 was all about recognizing, celebrating success. We're not very good at it this region. We need to get better at it, and we need to promote the fact that, you know, it's not a bad thing to be successful. So with that introduction, looking forward to the panel. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Donna. Appreciate that. We're going to hear from our panel, and let's get to them right now. I'm pleased to be able to very briefly introduce you to Ryan Marshall from Myomar Molecular, Chief Operations Officer. They've developed a urine-based diagnostic tool to identify early stages of muscle atrophy. Welcome, Ryan. Rashmi Prakash, CEO and founder of Aruna Revolution, an award-winning fiber tech company transforming agricultural waste into compostable materials for health and hygiene. Welcome. And Hanafi from NovaResp Technologies. The company's developed a patented software compatible with any positive airway pressure machine to dramatically improve comfort and adherence to therapy for obstructive sleep apnea patients. That's a long sentence. I'm sorry I ran out of wind at the end there. Thank you for being here. Guiding the conversation with the panel, our moderator, Leslie McNabb-Critis, is the director of the Creative Destruction Lab Atlantic. This lab, housed here in the Faculty of Management, is an objectives-based mentorship program for early-stage science and tech-based startups with a track record for increasing the probability of success by providing venture founders with mentorship from experienced entrepreneurs, operators, and investors. And about a week ago in this very room, the magic happened with startup companies predominantly from this region being supported and mentored by 3 full rows of business leaders who volunteered their time for a whole day to come in and say, here's our advice for you, here's our counsel for you, take it or leave it, but also who at the end raised their hands and said, I will go on mentoring this company, which I think is a truly tremendous way to bring together the people in this region who care about the success of entrepreneurs in this region, but also people from across Canada and around the world who come in because of the talent that we have here and the opportunity that we see. So great to have Leslie here from CDL Atlantic. Leslie, over to you.
Great, thanks for that warm introduction, Mike. And I want to point out that Don and Paula, who are in the audience today, were 2 of those mentors working with the companies last week. So thank you for that time that you give to these companies. So I'm delighted to be here today with 3 incredible CDL Atlantic alumni to explore their entrepreneurial journeys and the health innovations that they're bringing to life. I was just sharing with Jamie before the panel got started. Before joining CDL, I was the director of the Center for Family Business here in the faculty. And one of the first conferences I attended in that role was face-to-face when it was held in Badek. And that was obviously a conference founded by Neville. And I still remember being struck by his enthusiasm, his energy, endless energy, and his deep passion for connecting people. So I think he would be very proud to see this room gathered together today, and it's a real honor to be moderating the panel that bears his name. So let's get to the real superstars. Let's begin with these companies' origin stories. At CDL, we're always fascinated to understand what sparks a startup, especially the unmet need, the market demand, or personal motivations that drive these founders. So Rashmi, I'm going to start with you. What inspired you to start Aruna Revolution, and how did you identify the gap in the menstrual product market?
Absolutely. So my background's actually in biomedical engineering. And so I did my undergraduate degree, my master's degree, and then I started working in the field where I developed assistive technologies all the way to surgical robots. So I was in the field, and during the pandemic, I was working as a clinical engineer at the hospital. And actually, this was one of the moments where I realized that there was a problem with the healthcare industry, and this was the waste that's being generated by the healthcare industry. So I was in an OR room observing a surgery, and I saw literally garbage bags full of this OR waste. And it was really shocking to me because I had the realization that while we're healing one person today, all of this waste that's being generated is ending up in the landfill, in our soil systems, in our waterways, and that is resulting in microplastics in our bodies. So in reality, all of this waste is harming billions of people in the future, and not that far off in the future. And the healthcare system should never be harming anyone. And the way to fix that and the responsibility of fixing that was the engineers that were creating the devices and creating the packaging around the devices. And so I felt a responsibility around that. But then on top of that, I started thinking about the ways that I was doing that in my own life too. And I saw one month, like I was looking at the garbage and I saw it full of menstrual products that I'd used that month. And I realized that this was a problem that 50% of the world's population faces. And that's when I started working on this, and that's how this problem came about. And specifically the materials around the menstrual products was what I realized was resulting in all of this waste that was being generated, and that I looked at that, and that was the case for all of the disposable hygiene products, and that's how Aruna and the revolution started.
I love it. And if you're not following, if you're on Instagram, I'm just going to do a little shout out. Aruna has a great Instagram account that I'm following, and it's very insightful. So, okay, Hamed, how about you? NovaResp.
Firstly, it's an honor to be here and share the panel with both of you. That I admire them and their companies. So NovaResp, we're focused on obstructive sleep apnea. How many people in the audience know someone or are using a CPAP machine? So that's
There's the market demand right there.
So that's the inspiration. My father has severe sleep apnea with AHI of 70, meaning 70 times an hour he stops breathing for periods longer than 10 seconds. He was prescribed with the CPAP machine, but he doesn't like using it. He was struggling. It's an uncomfortable machine, but it solves a big problem. There is a gap there with comfort. So my background is electrical and biomedical engineering, and I was also trained by this school under Dr. David Roach for business and commercialization of medical devices. So I found this gap of comfort and wanted to address it somehow. CPAP machines are still going to be delivering air through a mask, but we found that these machines are reactive. You get the closures, then they increase the pressure, and that pressure kind of causes the experience you feel through the mask. And if that pressure could be lower, the experience with the mask would be easier. So you don't wake up throughout the night and rip off the mask from your face subconsciously. And this ties into the market where insurance covers the cost of the machine if you use it more than 4 hours a night. So it's all tied in together. And so we came up with a solution to solve that.
There's always a money angle. We're going to talk more about money a little later. I love how it tends to be a personal problem that you're observing or that's impacting you that often leads to these innovations. So let's go to you, Ryan. I know you weren't the founding member of Myomar Molecular, but I know you know the backstory. So share with us how Myomar came to be.
I'll try my best. First off, pleasure to be here. Really happy to be here on behalf of my CEO, Rafaela Andrade. I know some of you in the audience probably know her, so don't tell her what I say today so she doesn't hold it over my head. And I'll try to manifest her thoughts and feelings through me, but I'll do my best. The work that Rafaela had performed here at Dalhousie is quite significant. Myself, I'm a biochemist and biomedical scientist, so I've had an interest not just in muscle metabolism and the body in general, but in this company that Rafaela has been developing. I've been in industry for quite some time, and she allowed me to join the company. I begged her to join because this technology is absolutely revolutionary. No other organization in the world is doing what Myomar Molecular is doing. And the work that she had performed at Dalhousie really created this technology, and she was able to utilize her preclinical research in animal models, translate it into humans, and then identify an entire panel of biomarkers that was able to identify muscle degeneration, and through that created a brand new technology, which is extremely exciting. Obviously, there's a big market gap for muscle degeneration and sarcopenia. One of the biggest things for us is measurement of sarcopenia, but also functional analysis at the cellular level for biomarkers. And so we were able to fill that gap in the fact that right now on the market, there's only a few types of technologies that can assess muscle health. And really, it's a quantitative analysis. It's really DEXA scanning. There's some blood biomarkers as well, but these are very inaccessible, challenging to get, and are costly and time consuming. And so what we have is a very simple urine-based analysis. Pee in a cup. And we can run your analysis and give you an assessment of your level of risk of sarcopenia and muscle degeneration. So it's really cool, and I think for Rafaela it was a personal story, in that one of her family members was impacted by a muscle disease, and she saw her family member's health decline over a period of time, and she thought to herself, is there a way to fix this and maybe be more proactive and preventative in muscle health as people age? So for her, being a part of CDL, being a part of Dalhousie, really struck up a brand new technology and something that we're really excited about to, number one, bring to market and to advance into new fields.
Thanks. So exciting, so much expertise and passion and drive that contributes to these startup success. But one of the main things is differentiation. We always say at CDL we're looking for ventures that have a unique solution and will set them apart in a large addressable market. So Hamed, your company is operating in a crowded sleep apnea space. How does NovaResp stand out as disruptive and effective?
So before ChatGPT became so famous and everyone started talking about AI, we were brainstorming on how to make therapy better than what it is, because there are top companies in the market that are honestly saving lives when people use the CPAP machines, but there is a comfort problem there. And we were thinking, okay, these apneas happen, pressure goes up, how can we reduce that pressure? And we first thought, okay, what if we prevented these apneas before they would occur? So forecast that an apnea is about to happen. Started collecting data, realized it's possible, because we can't put aside the technical part. It has to work. Realized that we can predict, ran a trial, realized that, okay, we can prevent. Now can we use that to reduce the pressure, and does that actually improve comfort? So all of that, we're talking about health, all of that done through clinical trials. That's finally proven. And we just happen to be the only company in the market that's doing that. And it was done because in the very beginning, we knew what exact gap in the market we have to address.
I love that. And so aside from a unique solution, founders also have to have persuasiveness. Getting stakeholder buy-in is often one of the biggest challenges early stage for founders. So Rashmi, how is Aruna Revolution tackling the stigma around menstruation, and how does that tie into your commitment to sustainability in menstrual products?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good business has a story to tell, absolutely. And I think for us, we wanted to do more than just create a menstrual product that was good. We wanted it to be accessible, available, people to be comfortable to talk about it. Around the time that I started the company, I was actually learning more about my own menstrual health. And I think that's actually a common thing for a lot of women these days, is we aren't really taught about it at all in school. And so we end up learning about it in our 20s and our 30s, sometimes even in our 40s. And so, yeah, I think that I wanted to try and tackle all of that and use that to propel Aruna forward with the product as well. So we started talking about menstrual stigma. We have our own podcast called Flow and Tell, and this is on YouTube, and it's been doing really well. And what we've done with it is brought together different combinations of people, mom and her son, a group of girlfriends, a group of guy friends, and got them to authentically talk about periods. Like just talk about it. Just go in front of the camera. We guided them with some questions and things to talk about, but they talked about it, and it was received so well. One of our most recent videos has about 125,000 views and has thousands and thousands of comments of people going in and being like, it's so nice to see men talking about periods this way. It's like, it's healing. And then they were also sharing their own anecdotes. And so I think we're certainly using menstrual stigma to initiate the conversation and using Aruna as like the vessel for that. But that's also allowing us to use a platform and create a platform to talk about our products and sustainability too. I think that there's a massive intersection when it comes to human health and environmental health that we often don't talk about. And so we're using our platform to talk about that as well, and using that to guide our sustainability, both from the environmental perspective, but also from the societal, and then of course from the economical perspective too. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
I love it. And so again, go follow that. Go follow her YouTube or Instagram. It's amazing. Okay, so Rashmi and Hamed would know this because they were founders who went through our CDL program. So Ryan, you weren't part of Myomar when Myomar was in the program, but at CDL, we focus founders on hitting 3 core objectives every 8 weeks, and that's really to intentionally push the founders to make some progress. So Ryan, talk to me, you're the COO, talk to us. What were some of the key operational milestones and challenges maybe in bringing Myomar's urine test to market, and how did you ensure a successful launch and validation of that?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's probably 3 or 4 different areas, big milestones that we were able to achieve relatively quickly. And I think being in Canada was really important for us, and being in Halifax was important as well. But the first one was the clinical validation. So being able to translate the preclinical research into clinical work. So all of our clinical studies were completed in the Atlantic region. So having access to that type of facility and management of those trials was important for us. So that was really the first big milestone to project us and to validate our technology. And then from there, getting the regulatory approval from Health Canada. So we have a medical device establishment license as a Class 1 device. Obviously, the clinical work was a prerequisite to get that medical license or medical device establishment license through Health Canada, which was a massive milestone for us, and that enabled us to then go to market, which was number 3. But I think a big piece of that for us as well in that process was we put together a small hiring plan because we wanted a dedicated team, and some of our team are actually here today. They're in the crowd as a part of this talk, but. For us, the access to talent and the recruitment that's happening in Atlantic Canada has been it's been excellent for us because we've had an excellent team, a great hiring process, and allowed us to advance rapidly, not just our technology, but how we can go to market and how to make an impact here in Atlantic Canada. So I think there's 3 or 4 different major milestones that we're able to achieve. Challenges, I would say, just being in Atlantic Canada. Obviously, there's a market access challenge. Obviously, there's a few million people here on the Atlantic coast, so being able to be nationally, and I think Don touched this today, just earlier. We need to have access to larger national industries and international as well. So those all come with their own challenges. But right now, Myomar is expanding nationally, and so. The challenge is to expand into those regions, get access to other partners, and to build the company in a way that's not just meaningful for Myomar, but for Halifax as well.
It's like we set this up, and we didn't, but it's a perfect segue to my next question. And when Don was speaking, it resonated. So sometimes there is a perception in Atlantic Canada that we're too small for big innovation. And we all know that that's not the case. But founders do have some unique challenges. So Ryan referenced a few. Rashmi, thoughts on, growing a company here on the East Coast? Any unique challenges that stand out to you?
I think for me it feels like the opposite because I moved from Vancouver here to here.
We love to hear that.
Yeah. So and I did that intentionally because the market to me here is more accessible. In Vancouver and Toronto, you're in a crowded space, and it's hard to make as much traction, especially when you're really early on. Maybe as you're growing in the market, it might be good to be there. But I think when we were there, we were far too early, and it wasn't the right space for us. But coming out here, we were able to tap into the resources, tap into the market. It was so much more effective for us to be there, and I 100% credit us to growing to where we are today, to being in Atlantic Canada, like without a doubt.
Round of applause for that answer. Amazing. Hamed, what's your take on this? Challenges, Pros, cons? What's your thoughts?
I'm with Rashmi, honestly. I haven't seen anything but support in this region. The only problem we used to have was running clinical trials here because of the amount of red tape we used to have. And honestly, since Nova Scotia Health Innovation Hub and the efforts at the Life Sciences Nova Scotia, this red tape has, I'm running trials fast to the point that large companies that I talk to would ask whether we can run our trials here. To raise money, to have supportive people, and I'm an immigrant, from the moment I stepped in Halifax, I saw everybody being kind and nice and supportive. Chose to stay and not leave Halifax, although I'm originally from Iran, and most people would leave to a city that has more Iranians, but I wanted to stay and start something here. That translates into the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. Everybody is supportive. They want to see you succeed. I don't know why. I think this is the place to start a company.
Excellent. And I'm just going to continue along that thread because you mentioned clinical trials. So obviously some startups take longer to establish. Healthcare innovation in particular often has a long path to validation sometimes, especially when clinical trials are involved. So Hamed, you talked about clinical trials. Can you talk us through a little bit of what that process looked like, and how did patient feedback inform any shape or development of your product?
So for any test that you want to do in medical technology, firstly, I'm jealous of class 1 because the process is slightly. Classes are for level of safety and risk assessment you need to take to get things approved. And in breathing, it would be class 2. If it's surgery, class 3. So it gets harder and harder. So for us, it was first collecting data from patients. We had the support locally at the time from Snore Shop. Dr. Neil Smith, the founder, was very supportive right away, and I'm sure he's been supportive of these companies as well. We collected data. It's all through Research Ethics Board. And then later, to actually test the algorithm on patients, we had to go through not only the local Research Ethics Board, but also through Health Canada to get approval for a limited number of patients to try our technology on. And then it comes to the support of, honestly, Nova Scotians, because some of those patients volunteered and said, I'll stay with you for a year until you perfect your algorithm. So we just, for a year, just tested different versions of the algorithm on home-friendly, our aunts and uncles.
I was just going to say, friends and family are your
with
first
their
patients?
feedback and with the sensors that we had on them, we perfected this to a unique spot that no one can be unless they test for a year. So
amazing. So it's a long road, but it can be done with perseverance.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So I said I was going to talk about money. One thing all startups need, generally, is money. So raising capital is tough for all founders, but especially for women. Little stat that we like to mention all the time at CDL, women receive less than 3% of VC funding, despite often outperforming their male-led counterparts. So Rashmi, let's talk about money and talk about going into a room of investors, I can imagine, to talk about menstruation. So what has your experience been like navigating gender bias in the funding process? And what shift in the venture capital landscape would you like to see to better support women-led startups?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think gender bias when it comes to funding certainly exists, and it's always a challenge to navigate it, especially being a product that has so much stigma around it. And so what I like to do is I like to go in a room and be like, I was on my period one day. That's the start of my pitch. And you can see immediately people laugh about it. They start to get comfortable with the topic. And I kind of give them space to adjust that comfort level as well. I think it's important to meet people where they are sometimes, and recognize that not everyone is in the same space. And one thing that we've realized is people are comfortable with people that look and sound like them, right? And in most of these VC spaces, it's usually white men, and I am not a white man, in case you weren't aware. But that's okay, though. I think that just understanding that, and then understanding the language that you need to speak and how you need to communicate that, I think is really important. And then outside of that, also seeing more and more women coming into the world of VC and getting into angel investing, and I think has been really great. It has allowed me to shift the conversation to talk more about the technical side of things, because oftentimes I think when I have a lot of VC conversations, and it's I've noticed that for me, the conversation's more around how are you going to mitigate risk? Whereas for male counterparts, I've noticed that it's more like, how are you going to be successful? How are you going to win big? So the conversations have been quite interesting, and it's understanding and navigating that. It takes time, but it's certainly doable.
Excellent. Okay, Ryan, at CDL, our overarching mission is to accelerate the commercialization of science and technology for the betterment of humankind, which is very aspirational, very big picture here. In healthcare, that mission becomes especially meaningful, I think. So can you share a pivotal moment that Myomar Molecular, where you've seen your company has made a tangible public health impact? Has there been a story or a moment in the journey that really stands out as, wow, we're really making a difference, we're really going to help people?
Yeah, great question. So we're currently in market. So we are making, with our partners and direct-to-consumer models, we have certainly seen a big uptake in some sales and revenue, and we're making an impact, and a lot of people are enjoying the product, and the feedback that we're getting is excellent, which is great for traction right now. But I think going back to the pivotal piece for the company was actually during the beta testing, which happened much earlier on from when I started with the company. But when the beta testing went out public, there were about 1,000 people, I think just over 1,000 people that had signed up to be a part of the beta testing program, which I think at that point the team was like, okay, there's some people are interested. This is exciting. Let's get this thing moving, and we can make an impact. Which was, I think, the first pivotal point. And then from there, obviously, we couldn't test everybody in the world because it's very challenging logistically to send a urine cup to South Africa. But there were people that were interested all over the world to be a part of this. So it allowed us to understand, okay, there is a global impact here, and there's something that we can do to help people, which is interesting. But then during the beta testing, there was one client, I guess I can call them a client at that point, one of the testers, she had taken the test a first time, and we had seen that there were some challenges with some of the biomarkers, some anomalies that we had not seen before with other people that were testing. So it was a little outside the clinical data that we had, and we didn't understand what was going on. So we ran the test a couple of different times and confirmed the data. And what we found actually during that process, it was about a 6-month process throughout the beta testing. We found that during that process, she was actually diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So for us, we started out with understanding muscle and muscle degeneration, but we think that there's a bigger impact, not just from a muscle standpoint, but also musculoskeletal diseases like arthritis, impact on joints, impact on bone. And we think that just by looking at these clinical validated biomarkers, it was a bit of a pivotal moment for us and a light bulb moment to say, okay, there's other chronic conditions that this technology can impact, which we didn't set out to do, but it allowed us to say, okay, there's more to this than just muscle. It's more of a holistic approach, and we're evaluating those now.
I love that. And that happens often in our CDL room. We've seen it happen where there's applicability. The technology can be used in a different vertical, and all of a sudden, there was one great company that shifted completely in the middle of their CDL program based on the guidance and counsel of the mentors to say, have you thought about this, utilizing the technology in a different vertical? So that's great. Okay, so I'm going to take us back to AI because you started this conversation, Hamed, but it goes without saying that these days technology is moving faster than ever, and entrepreneurs are looking at ways to leverage everything from AI to automations so that they can work faster and smarter. So would love to hear from all of you about how technology has transformed your journey and how are you using it to accelerate your company's success. So.
In our case, it's just making things faster and more efficient. Even our programmers are now using tools that automate their code, and it just does it better than after you would have perfected it. So why not use it and make things better? It doesn't mean that you can't protect your IP or patent things. It's just the human factor is always different. The way you apply AI towards health could always be protected, but in the weeds of things, you can use AI to accelerate, and we're using it.
What about you, Rashmi?
Absolutely. I would say the same way. I think it's to get rid of tasks that are redundant. I feel like we should be using human power to create and to do things that are novel, and we don't want them doing repetitive things. And so we're utilizing AI to make that part faster so that people have more time and capacity to do more of the creative and the connection to other humans and accessing different markets. Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, this is probably not as sexy as AI, but logistics. For us, we send biological samples all across Canada, and in order to do that, you have to have expedited shipment and tracked shipments because the stability of our samples actually impact the end product. So there's been a lot of advancement actually happening in the supply chain, chain of custody, and logistics spaces world. And I know this doesn't really get much of a shout out. It's mostly machine learning and robotics, which we also have.
We have a supply chain in CDL.
But yeah, we've been able to implement and transform the company to reach different regions than just a specific region within Canada. We're able to reach Vancouver. We're able to reach up the Northwest Territories, and people are interested in doing this test in remote locations as well. So being able to have access to that and the transformation in a way that we can track shipments, have remote monitoring with IoTs and different elements that have been implemented in the last few years have really transformed the way that we can have access to clientele all over the country, and it's really helped us in our journey to market.
Well, and that means that you're growing bigger outside of Atlantic Canada, and you can grow big based here. So that's great. CDL Atlantic has been super proud to have played a small part in all of these companies' entrepreneurial journeys. So maybe I can just start with you, Rashmi. How did CDL help, if at all?
Yeah, absolutely. CDL helped massively for us. I would say it was a very integral part in changing perspective for us. I think it really shifted our perspective from being a small startup that's based in Atlantic Canada or even Dartmouth to a global company. It really makes you think on a global scale how big your company can get. And having all the different perspectives from the mentors that have experience in the industry is so valuable because it lets you refine your business model with that much experience. And it's not something that you can do in an isolated way without access to that many people. So yeah, massively grateful for CDL.
And Hamed?
Firstly, tell me another room where I can get John Risley, George Armoyan, John Lindsay, and Jim Spatz in the same room and get advice from them. So that was the first thing. It's they can quickly break down your business and ask you the right questions, which is very impressive. And the other was some of them did invest in NovaResp as well. And
money.
Then
Back to money.
Yeah, and then that fame sort of helped us close the round.
Awesome. And I know you weren't with Rafaela when she went through CDL, but can you talk to me about mentors, advisors that are helping guide Myomar?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what the other panelists have mentioned. I think the access to the network, to the mentorship that's continued since day one has been excellent. Our mentors have been very open to receiving phone calls at 6 p.m. on a Friday, and then giving us advice when we need it. There's also been some financial support in our pre-seed round, and there's been lots of support from the mentorship. And I think it kind of goes to say that this room and this program is extremely valued and important, not just for us, but many companies that are trying to establish organizations like us over the coming years.
Yeah, and see, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Creative Destruction Lab, our tagline is build something massive. So that's what we aim to do when we're bringing these early stage startups in to get this mentorship so that they can grow and scale more quickly. And so with that, that's the end of my formal questions, but I know that Shelley has carved out some time for audience questions. So Shelley is going to do her best Oprah Winfrey and run around with the microphone. Does anybody have a question for Ryan, Rashmi, or Hamed? I see a hand. Excellent.
If you don't mind, I have a couple of questions. Ryan, is your test available to the public? If so, does our health system have it? Or can you give us the name of what it would be? So if we went to a lab, if possible, that we could receive a test? Or am I premature?
Yes, sir. You can go right to our website and buy a test if you like right now.
Okay. Can you?
But I'll give you some more context as well.
An additional client.
okay.
We love this. We're generating business in this room.
Okay.
It's great.
The other word, everybody said everything, and I'm not familiar with the company, so can you spell the name for me so I know it?
Yeah, I think it's MYOMAR, and then molecular, MOLEC.
I can get that part.
Okay. Can somebody check me on my spelling? I don't know if I got that right.
I have it written right here. I can check.
I have somebody that's just, everything's on the phone today, I guess. I have everything here, and even your education, believe it or not. Okay. Thank you.
We also have a number of businesses as well that we've partnered with in around Halifax. So you can access it there as well if you're part of those programs, but you can also buy it directly from us as well, and we'll send you the kit directly.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have a second question. This one is for Hamid. Your sleep apnea item, is that available to the public, or is it still in research? And if it's available, I have a machine and I deal with one of them. There's really two main companies in the area that supply them. Maybe you could answer that part.
It's not available in the market, but we do run trials that if you were willing to volunteer in, you could participate. But our customers would be CPAP companies. We've made the software CPAP agnostic, and we're in touch with all the companies that are out there, and we'll see where those talks go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, my name is Pallavi. I have a question. I just wanted to know the journey between the idea and the implementation. So everyone, we get idea. So how do we start? So how much time it took for you to start, and what are the initial steps that you suggest, like people like us who want to start, or who want to see ourselves as starting some business. So what do you suggest?
Go, Rashmi.
Yeah, go for it. I'll go for it. So going from idea to getting started, working on a project, I think when you have an idea, what I would say, there's a couple of things that I would do. If I was working on something new, I would immediately start talking to the people that might be the consumers for it, the people that would purchase it, see if they would actually purchase it. If you've read the book called The Mom Test, you'll know how to ask the questions and make sure that it's not biased. And then, you start looking into the market, seeing if there is a market for it, how would you sell it, what would you do, and kind of start coming up with the idea around not only the product, but the way that you're solving it, and make sure that you fully understand the problem. And then you kind of just jump into it. I think if you wait too long and try to understand how to build a business, you kind of lose your advantage sometimes. And quite oftentimes there's not really one standard way of doing something. You learn it along the way. I certainly had no clue what I was getting myself into when I first started, but I'm glad that I jumped into it. And start talking to the people around you, connect with the resources like CDL, Life Science Nova Scotia, IRAP. I see so many in just this room here, so yeah.
Anything you want to add, Hamed or Ryan? Any?
Yeah, I mean, I think jump with both feet in. I think there's lots of support around Halifax to get you on your feet. I think one of the biggest pieces is, I'll say market intelligence, but trying to understand if there is a gap that currently exists with the idea that you're trying to present to the market. If there's something that you identify that is a gap, I think you can certainly build something yourself and then get support to take it to market. My focus is really commercialization, and you can certainly build a company to take it commercial if you can identify that gap. So anything that you can work on from a technology standpoint or software, or which is a new technology, you can certainly take it to market if there's a gap for it.
I'll echo what they said. Having a need in the market and the customers is first, then the solution should come. Engineers often invent something, then try to find
fall in love. They fall in love with a solution that doesn't have a problem.
Yeah.
We see that. There's also resources like at the university. So there's sandboxes in many of the faculties here at the university, and that's often a great exploration opportunity to really see if what your idea is something tangible that you should, pursue and investigate. Other questions?
I think for me, the first question will be, how difficult was it for you were you ever at a stage where you were like, okay, I need to find an original idea? Or it's just like you woke up and then, oh, that's an idea. So that'll be my first question. How difficult was it for you to find an idea? Did you have that mindset of, I need to find a problem which I need to solve? And then my second question will be, when it comes to IP protection, how difficult is the process? And how difficult is the process will be my second question. I don't know if I'm forgetting something, but I think I'll leave it there for now. Yeah.
So let's start with the idea. I think based on your origin stories, it sounded to me like the ideas came as a result of your own personal sort of challenges that you witnessed. But Rashmi?
Yeah, start with a problem, not an idea. Find something that you want to solve, that you care about, that you will grind like tirelessly for, that you will have conviction to solve for. If you find a problem that you care enough that much about, then you will build a business around it. You'll be able to solve it. But if you don't have that drive and you kind of just go in and you've got, I've got this idea here, the amount of effort and work that is required to build a business, it will be hard to have that conviction.
Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same, right? Like any investors that we speak with, the first question is why do I care? Why is this important? Why is this important? And so, in order to answer that question, I think you have to be passionate about, number one, identify what the problem is, and then be passionate about solving that problem. So it goes along the lines of what Rashmi has just said. So
let's talk IP. Hamed, you want to take the IP question?
I see Shelley sitting there.
Yeah, right there.
Another CDL friend, Shelley Hessian.
IP is for medtech, other than tests and patients and data, IP is the most important part because that's how you protect the methodology of how you execute. NovaResp has, I think 8 patents.
8.
And then each are approved in multiple geographies, and some are pending. And we constantly come up with new ones just to protect the area.
Have you had anybody try to do you know of anybody that's trying to copy what you're doing?
Right at this moment, no. There's something called freedom to operate, where you get a patent firm to investigate this area and see if there is infringements or not. We got a positive one not too long ago, so right now we feel good. But competition is coming, and I think it'll get crowded. Yeah.
Right. Any other comments on IP?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's overly difficult to secure a patent. It's lengthy and expensive. So start it now.
I think that there's also processes that you can use to make sure that you don't spend so much money up front. Like, you go through a process where you file a provisional patent first. You can take that provisional patent, convert it into a PCT, and then from the PCT, you'll have about, like, between the provisional and the PCT, you have about 30 months to then really make your IP strong, and also figure out what markets you want to protect your IP in, and then from there, then you would be spending the big bucks to actually file the application.
Okay.
Hello. Yes. My question's tied more to research, probably for Ryan and Hamid, since you both have a master's and a PhD as well. So I'm asking more so from an early career research perspective. I have a bachelor's. I graduated from that last year. I'm actually working at the Nova Scotia Health Authority. And I just wanted to know that when do you decide to start a company and create a product, going from the research setting into the business or entrepreneurship setting?
What was that? When did you decide?
Yeah.
Okay.
When do you decide?
How do you convert your mindset from being a researcher to being an entrepreneur? And it's an interesting question. We've had founders in the CDL program. I can remember the very first year that we ran the program, we had somebody, and the mentor said, do you want to be a researcher and teach, or do you want to be an entrepreneur? Because the two don't always marry up well. So, thoughts?
Yeah, I can give you my experience. I didn't start the company, but what I did post-masters, I decided to get into industry straight away. Obviously, when you finish your master's, you get pressure to do your PhD, but you have to make a decision if you want to stay in academia or if you want to get into industry. And so for me, I wanted to get into pharmaceutical development. Immunology was a bit of my background, and then eventually into metabolism and muscle. But I decided to get into project management right away. And I think that this is I studied Lean Six Sigma at Dalhousie as well, so I have process background too. But you have to make a decision if you want to continue your research and identify technology, which certainly works as well for many people up here. They've completed PhDs. Many in the industry have completed PhDs and founded a technology. So you can certainly do that. But for me, it was a decision to get into industry right away, get experience in project management, and then really focus on projects in the scientific field.
Ahmed, what about you?
I think it's famous that entrepreneurs make bad employees. But I have a twist on that. I think there are not many places that can have employees like entrepreneurs. And I've tried to create that situation at NovaResp where everybody feels like a founder, a part of what it's being built, so that you have passion to go to work and get work done. That's one thing, and the other thing is I was always interested in the practical part of research. If the science part is not there, we don't have enough in hand to make something, but that's what I was interested in. And the commercialization course I took with Dr. Roach, where it just opened my eyes towards entrepreneurship.
I have two questions. One question is, I know entrepreneurship, you have to put in a lot of risk into it, right? What pushes you to go through this route? And second question would be, initially, how do you market your product, either to consumer, either to businesses?
So what pushes you in this route of entrepreneurship? Shall I play the Jeopardy music?
Yeah, I mean it's a risky business for sure. I think number one, you have to be passionate. And you also have to believe that you can change the world. I know that that's kind of cliche, I suppose, to say, but you have to believe in what you're doing and that you can make a difference. And so, I'll go back to my experience again. I've worked for larger organizations, and it's sometimes you're just it's probably also cliche as well, but a cog. You're just going through the efforts day to day in an office building that you're just part of one of 1,000. But in a startup environment, in a company that's building a technology that could make a massive difference, every day I'm inspired. Just coming to work and doing what I think I can to give it my all and to make that difference, and hopefully at some point make an impact on somebody's life, even if it's just one. I think that's important. And again, coming back to getting into industry, this gentleman's comment up here, I think getting in industry and understanding how the world works in that way, and some of these larger organizations, and then be able to come back to this type of environment and apply that experience into building something new. You can really leverage that experience and build something that you want to see. So for me, that's what, having that inspiration and knowledge that at some point you're going to build something not just for the end user, but also build a company that is going to make a difference in people's lives that are working for that company as well.
Another cliche, no risk, no reward, right? Rashmi?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think either path you choose is a risk. Going into entrepreneurship certainly is a risk, and we know the risk, but isn't working a 9-to-5 a risk in the sense that, you're going to go spend 40 years of your life doing something that you might not enjoy, you might not come out of it with enough savings to retire, you might not do work that is impactful to the world and to the people around you. I would say that there's risk on both sides, and it's more so what you want to do out of life, I would say, and how hard you're willing to work to do that.
That's a great way to flip the script on risk right there. I just want to commend you. Marketing, you had a question about marketing. How do you market to your first customers? Was that your question? Initial marketing. Any comments?
Just can I go back to the last question?
Sure. I didn't mean to.
Thanks for reminding me. And this is a health panel, and entrepreneurship in health is just respect to all businesses, but it's just different from anything else. And the passion also comes from, imagine eventually actually helping someone live healthier. It's just the reward is it's priceless. And when we interview people for NovaResp, if people forget to mention that one of the passions of working here is to one day help someone, it's a big
they don't
red
get the
flag.
job.
Yeah. Market.
Marketing.
Actually in CDL, one of the big things with NovaResp was are we a device company or are we a software company? In every session with every group of mentors, we kept flip-flopping between the two. Eventually, we landed as a software because it was our core capability. But market research on its own is a whole thing that we need to do. You interview your customers. So at first, interviewing customers, if I'm going direct to market, is patience. Customer discovery of patience, but then they turned into my not direct customers. Customers are CPAP companies, so I had to go in and talk to all CPAP companies and see what they want improved there. And then market analysis is also like not everything that CPAP companies would tell you, because it's not always they want to admit to their weaknesses. It's through talking to patients that I realized, okay, there's a weakness here that we need to address that it seems like they're not addressing. And although there are customers, they wouldn't tell us that, and somehow landed on the right solution.
Anything else on marketing that either of you want to share?
Yeah, you just got to come to events like this. I just sold a test a minute ago, so.
There you go. According to my clock, we probably have time for one more question. Oh, we've got a few. No. Let's go to the front row. They have good questions. I know they do.
Yeah, I'll take one. Thank you very much. Thanks very much to the panel, and congratulations on your successes. Really inspiring stories, I think, for everyone. Since you're all in the health field, I'm just wondering what kind of reaction practical, substantive, or otherwise you've had, say, from the hospitals or from Nova Scotia Health to your various initiatives?
Good question. Who wants to go first? Go, Ryan.
Yeah. So one of the key areas that we're focused on is orthopedics. So we have a subject matter expert in our scientific advisory committee and advocate on our behalf, who is a lead orthopedic surgeon here in the province. And we're planning on implementing a total knee arthroplasty study to potentially be a triaging tool. We're going to evaluate this through a clinical study. We want to start that here in the province, and through Dr. Dunbar, actually, is our lead in that area, planning to start up that study very soon. We haven't implemented that yet with Nova Scotia Health, but it's something that we're in discussions with the team.
Anybody else? Rashmi?
Yeah, I think for us, working with the Nova Scotia Health Innovation Hub has been great. We were able to deploy our products into their space. We were able to get feedback. We were able to get their support. I think going into the hospitals has been a bit of a longer journey. I think that there's a lot more back and forth and trying to navigate different procurement systems and kind of being passed around by different people to try and get into those spaces has been a bit challenging for us. But I think with some time and resilience, we'll get there.
Hamed?
Thankfully, the major use of CPAPs are at home and not at the hospital, so it's been easier to deploy. But Nova Scotia Health Nova Scotia Health Innovation Hub has been extremely supportive of that, and I appreciate that we have a government that's supporting health technologies.
We had a few more down here, Shelley.
Yeah. Hi, great presentation, thank you. This could be to anyone. Just wondering if projecting in the future as your company grows and there's more investment, do you see that the province and the region is supportive and conducive to kind of retaining you and, preventing you from being tempted to look elsewhere? You were talking about Toronto and Vancouver. The advantage of being here early on is you differentiate yourself from the crowded areas, but maybe that could be the inverse as you get bigger. Hopefully not.
I've been quite adamant on staying in Atlantic Canada. We've actually turned down 2 investors because they wanted us to move out of Atlantic Canada. So I'm quite intentional about the way I do things, and I want to work with the community and grow with the community. I'm very big on that, but I think at the same time, there are certain places where as you're growing, you need more support from the community as well, and so we're actively working with that and trying to engage with that. But one of the challenges is that Vancouver and Toronto might have more investors and more investment going into those spaces, but the investors in those spaces want you to move out to those spaces. So I think for me, it's making sure that we're working with the right investors that let us grow the way we want to grow, and hopefully that investment will come from our community here.
Anybody else, or next?
I'll just say the plan is to stay. I have a family here. I want to stay here. I'm not moving anywhere. But also, if you think about it, let's say that we exit to a big company that's outside of Nova Scotia. I think, firstly, keeping jobs here and keeping an office here is important. But also, there are multiple students per term that come through NovaResp. And there are 11 permanent employees that are graduates of DAL that have been trained, and they're all ready to be future entrepreneurs for Halifax. So the plan is stay, create employment here, absolutely. But let's not also forget that all this talent that's being trained in our startups are future entrepreneurs and are doing top-notch research that the whole planet is admiring.
Great.
Yeah. my wife is from Truro, and I couldn't leave this province if I wanted to. But no, we appreciate the roots that we have here in Nova Scotia and Halifax and the Atlantic region. Obviously, like Rashmi had mentioned, there's a lot of venture capital, angel firms, and other investment groups that are interested in investing in companies like ours that are rapidly growing, that have interest nationally and internationally. And there's always pressure to be in those regions as well to support development. Now, I also know of a lot of companies that have challenges in, not just raising money, but continuing their venture. So as a startup, you do have to balance risk with the organization with finding the right geography to be in. And we believe at Myomar, we appreciate the roots that are here, and we're going to remain here for the long term. And the advantage that what we have with Myomar is that we're able to ship our products out, which is really great. But you can also establish laboratory operations in different regions as well to have access to those areas too. So, we're going to have a basis that is here. We feel that support. We feel the intensity and the growth that's happening in Atlantic Canada, which is really great. So there is an ecosystem here, but we also have to support the development of the company and make the right decisions of where we need to be as well, just to expand the organization.
I think we have another question.
Thank you. I have a question for Rashmi about your recent experience on Dragon's Den. And I'm wondering if you could tell us about that experience and what it has done for your company since.
Yeah, absolutely. So our episode on Dragon's Den aired in January. And since then, our sales have skyrocketed. We launched our product with the episode airing. And so the sales have been phenomenal. And it's also brought about awareness to our mission and what we're working on. But it's also brought in more people considering our fibers for other projects as well. So utilizing our fibers for hydroponic systems, utilizing our fibers for makeup. There's so many applications of the fibers that we had never thought about. And because of the episode airing, it's now brought about awareness to that and the fact that we're working on these fibers that can be applied for all of that. So I think it's done quite a lot for us on multiple levels beyond just a national recognition.
Remind everyone of which dragon made the deal.
We actually had two dragons. We had Michelle and Manjeet.
Yes. Awesome. Dawn, you get the last word.
Oh, thanks. Great panel, by the way. Enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing your stories. One of the things I found as an entrepreneur that was really helpful is having, a goal in mind for the company. So I'm going to ask each of you, what is your big audacious goal for each of your companies?
Your BHAG, isn't that it? Big, hairy, audacious goal. Your BHAG.
Yeah. Okay. I'll attempt it. Like I mentioned at the beginning, and great question, Don, because this is something that we struggle with all the time. We always ask this question. What do we want to be when we grow up? So at the beginning of this talk, I talked about we're the only one in the space, the only company in the space that's analyzing muscle health. And so we want to be that accessible tool that anybody can utilize, not just from a usage standpoint at home, but having a device that allows you to have personalized and autonomous decision making on your muscular health. So we want to be that device, not just in Canada, but worldwide. We think that there's a number of different exits that we can get to as either from an IPO or from an acquisition standpoint. But we really want to push the pace on the way that people access their own muscle health and have autonomy over longevity and health span.
Rashmi, BHAG.
BHAG. Okay, so for Aruna, where I see Aruna in the future, the big goal that we have is every single product that is made out of natural plant fibers. So I was looking at that coffee cup, all the way to the toilet paper roll in your bathroom, to the Kleenex, to the makeup pads, to every single thing being made out of Aruna fibers. And the reason for that is because Aruna fibers are not resource intensive. They don't contain any toxic chemicals, so they're healthier for your body. They're higher performance, whereas currently products right now need to cut down trees outside. Like if you look at those beautiful trees, you need to cut it down to blow your nose for 2 seconds and throw it out. That's a completely irresponsible use of that resource. And the same goes for the resources that are used to grow cotton, to grow, to create bamboo fibers, to create all of these fibers, not to mention plastic fibers and the misuse of that as well. So I would say Aruna fibers will be in every product, and every product that you see will say powered by Aruna fibers, and you'll know that it's a product that's safe for you and safe for the planet.
Take us home, Hamed.
Just seeing our software CMAP on helping millions and millions of patients globally sleep better.
Awesome. Well, that takes us to the end of our discussion. A big thank you to our panelists, please, for being... Thank you for sharing your stories, your insights, your experiences with us. We're so proud at CDL to call you part of our family. You're building some of the most exciting health tech innovations here in Atlantic Canada. We can't wait to see how far you go when you get to those big, hairy, audacious goals. And to our wonderful audience, thank you for joining us for this year's Neville Gilfoy Entrepreneurship Panel. It's been a pleasure to celebrate innovation and entrepreneurship with all of you. And to close out today's event, I'm honored to invite Neville's son, Jamie Gilfoy, to share a few words. Jamie is an accomplished entrepreneur, a proud Dalhousie alum, and president of Aquatique Translation Services, someone who knows firsthand what it takes to build and scale a business. Jamie, floor is yours.
Hello. So thank you everyone for coming on behalf of the family. This is just super huge. Thank you to our amazing panelists. This is, the 9th anniversary of Neville's passing that's coming up, and time flies. This is, I think, maybe one of the best panels yet. Just really great content, great questions. So thank you to Dal and the team for putting this all together. Thank you to Don and Jim, because I don't know that we'd be here in the first place without you guys. And I just wanted to say that I think Neville would have just absolutely loved this for so many reasons. Like, what you guys are doing is super awesome. He really did believe in this region, and I think we had some really interesting thoughts today on both, being able to live here and succeed here and grow a company and choosing to be here. Also acknowledging that sometimes you got to do what you got to do to keep your company booming, but that, this is just the really awesome spot to live. And so I think lastly, some great questions today too, and that even if you're at, doing amazing things and deep in the journey, or if you're early on thinking like, where do I get an idea? What do I do? It all starts somewhere, and that you only get so many days on this planet, and nobody knows how many that's going to be. And these days it seems more uncertain than ever. But if you've got the bug and like the itch in your skin that you can do this, and you believe in yourself, bet on yourself and go for it. Just thank you, everybody. This fills our family with joy and pride, and you can do it. Go seize the day. Thank you.